Okay, just need to increase the gigawatts up to 1.20 watts. Where is that spanner? Ah. Now angle the acoustic coupler just so. Just have to take the compression tube and connect it to the waveform originator. And Eureka!
Welcome to Eureka, the Gnomish World of Warcraft podcast, with your hosts, Rock, and Pepe.
Hi, I'm the precisely engineered photo extractor, also known as Pepe.
And I'm Rock, second in command here at G4. And today, we're talking about the history of gnomes and the mega dungeon Tazavesh, the Veiled Market, which is coming in 9.1. First, what have you been up to in WoW recently?
Just keeping up with dailies, getting stuff ready for 9.1. I'm super excited for it. There's a lot that's coming with it. Wish it was here. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about some of the cool stuff. What have you been up to?
I have been trying to, after our mount discussion last time, I actually went and got on Simple Armory and started looking at what I could do to get some of the mounts that I hadn't achieved. And the ones I thought would be easiest to knock out kind of solo, for the most part, would be the glory of the dungeon hero type stuff.
Oh, you're going old school.
I feel like it's something I can work towards without the randomness factor. Like just farming rares and stuff, I don't find super enjoyable, but I do like running through old dungeons and stuff like that. So I think I had knocked out the rest of the Frozen Throne, Lich King raid achievements. I think I had to stand around and get a buff up to 30 stacks or something for one of the achievements and
Yes.
finally got that one.
Some of those old ones are pretty tough to do at max level.
Yeah, it's a little tedious. I had to just stand around and not kill anything. It was kind of annoying. It took me, I had to actually kill myself, wipe myself once because I was running out of time with the Berserk timer. That's pretty much all I've been up to. I saw you got layer 8 of the Twisting Corridor.
Yeah, myself along with two other officers, Lily and Tierman, we plugged away at Twisting Corridors. We did 2 layers at a time, so giving us a little break. But that's 6 hours of game time.
Which is not insignificant.
No, it was quite the adventure. Layer 7 was a cakewalk. We had fracture chambers 3 times in a row.
Oh, that's good.
So that was pretty sweet. All of our abilities lined up. It was really, really nice. But layer 8, we had to work for that. We did. What's wild is even at 13, we were getting one shot by stuff because of our abilities weren't, I was just getting a bunch of versatility as my blood DK.
You weren't getting good choices.
I was not getting the meta abilities. It was just really lackluster for all 3 of us.
It's kind of hit and miss with that.
It is, and that's the random aspect of it. We had to work for it, and that's what gave the sense of accomplishment that much more meaning. Because we actually had to work for it. We went into layer 15 with only 3 lives. We bought 2 lives at layer 15.
Whoa.
Lost all those lives on layer 16.
You weren't getting chased by the Terragru though,
No.
right? Not at that point. Okay.
We didn't die at all on layer 17, still at 0 lives, and then bought 2 more lives going into floor 18, and luckily we just kept our heads in the game, had our interrupts on point, and we did it. It was
That must have felt good then, because
oh man,
to get that close to completely wiping out of the dungeon at that late stage of the run, and I mean that's 3-hour commitment. That's awesome. That's got to be a good feeling.
Well, at this point, it was well over. We were 8 hours into it invested. We ran into the decision of, do we just give up now and walk out and start a new day later on, try for new abilities, or do we just go grab a drink, reset, and focus?
It's not timed.
It's not timed. So we were able to, we had the stalkers, there was these hunters that would bug us.
Oh, yeah.
So one person had to stay on watch while the other 2 people went to the washroom or whatever the case may be. But we decided, you know what? We're not giving up now. We invested already 3 hours at this point on this layer. Let's just watch our interrupts, watch our footing, and we did it. It was an accomplishment that it feels good. It feels good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think my account is up to ready to do layer 5,
which is perfect.
And I'm watching you guys. I'm I should just do that. I kind of resigned to not doing it because the main reason I was doing it was to be able to ride in the maw, and that's coming with 9.1 anyways. And I was it's so much work, but I like having goals in the game. The main content of for me, which is raiding, is kind of dried up a lot at this point. We're not really pushing too hard into heroic, and normal is pretty easy at this point. So it's like, it's just not a big focus. So I like the idea of having that kind of challenge. So I think I'm gonna pursue that.
Which is good. That achievement, it felt really good after we got it done. We were sitting on our mounts in Oribos, and you see people stop. They backtrack, they come back, and you know that they're looking
cool
at
mount.
you.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like it feels good. And now that we have it, the three of us have it, we're actually looking at not necessarily carrying, but helping the guild, that if people want to commit, we are willing to help those people progress through it. Right?
I think
like,
that's great.
Kind of like we did with hard mode Mechagon.
Totally. Yeah.
Which
I still need to revisit that, speaking of.
Yeah, that's another thing. When you have time, man, let us know. Which is ironic that we're talking about this because we're...
Oh, right. Let's transition to that then. So why don't you and I step into the Gnomish segment of our podcast? We'll step into the laboratory.
Perfect. See you there.
Laboratory access granted.
Welcome to the laboratory. Behold, as we push the simulation beyond all known boundaries. This is my greatest project yet. A phonomatic exploration of the Gnomish experience.
All right, so welcome to the laboratory. Today we're talking about, like we said, the history of the gnomes, the backstory. Where do we come from? Our origins. Initial gnomes were created by Mimiron, and Mimiron is a watcher that was created by the Titans, the Titan Pantheon. They created the Watchers and the Dragons and all that stuff on Azeroth to safeguard the world soul.
That's the impression that I got. There isn't actually a lot of history about gnomes.
Why is that?
Because we're very forward thinking. We look to create and improve instead of dwell.
Yeah, they're looking forward. They're trying to invent new things, and I think I read somewhere once that it's the only kind of records they really keep are scientific records, not historical records.
Yeah, facts. Just straight numbers. What works? If it didn't work.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it makes sense if they're inventors. The Society of Inventors, which I think is a commonly known trait of gnomes. They were created by Mimiron, but who's Mimiron? What was he about?
Well, Mimiron, like you mentioned, is a part of the Pantheons, the Titans' elite guardians, to fight against the old gods that were corrupting Azeroth. Considering destroying the old gods would destroy Azeroth itself, instead of doing that, the Titans imprisoned them and then had these jailers, these guardians. So Mimiron was keeper of these Titan jails.
Yeah, which is the story. Spoiler alert: this is the story of Ulduar. Is all these watchers are there keeping track of Yogg Saron in that instance, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, with Mimiron, considering he is our maker, he designed the mechagnomes, which is where gnomes come from. I'll get into the whole why we're fleshy beings now, which is based off of the Curse of Flesh.
Yeah.
That comes from Yogg Saron. The guardian that was watching Yogg Saron goes by the name of Loken. Loken was then corrupted by Yogg.
So let me tell you what I know about Loken. Loken was one of the Titan Keepers, and that was tasked by the Pantheon to watch over Azeroth. But with the old gods trapped under the planet, basically in all these jails, they could still whisper. I mean, you see that happening over and over again, right? But he was driven mad by Yogg Saron, almost like Deathwing was, right?
Yes.
That's the same thing that happened with Deathwing, is he essentially got corrupted by the old god whispers. Like, I guess Blizzard's got one story for corrupting people, powerful creatures, is the old gods corrupt them. But you were talking about we were mechagnomes. What does that mean?
We were mechanical constructs made as basically servants.
So, I remember seeing all this stuff. The story of it kind of plays out in Wrath of the Lich King expansion around Ulduar. That's when we really start learning about a lot of this stuff. I mean, that's the first time I think we were introduced to Mimiron, or even the idea of him.
Yeah, I read that somewhere, that's where Mimiron's first presence showed up.
Now, were you playing in Lich King?
I came in at the end of Lich King for Cataclysm.
Okay, so you didn't really see the end game content of Lich King until
I did through the eyes of my friends. My friends were raiding in Ulduar and ICC, so I got to see them do that, and seeing Ulduar from a non-biased, like it was just, I didn't know much about the game. I was able to see it as it was. In IRL, I deal with mechanical stuff all the time. So like to have that related in game was really, really cool. And it was basically my doorway into the game.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so that might be why you identify so much with gnomes.
Quite possibly. I love the fact of these living mechanical constructs.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that too. So I remember, so I didn't play, I played Lich King, but I was like really casual, so I never raided or did any of that, and there was no LFR yet, and so I didn't really get to see that stuff until I went back and was overpowering the content 2 expansions later or whatever, and could just go in and kill it with, my max level character.
Same.
Mimiron is basically a giant mechagnome model, the old style mechagnome, not mechagnomes like from Mechagon type.
We can go back to that Loken guy. With his betrayal, Mimiron found out, and Loken sought out to have Mimiron killed. But once he was killed, his creations, the mechagnomes, ended up saving his spirit and reanimating him into the construct that we know him as today. So we rebuilt him basically in his own image, based off of what he had created, and that was the mechagnomes.
But at that point, they are mechagnome robots, right?
The little mechagnomes that you see, not the new allied race mechagnomes, and we can get into that.
Right.
There is an original mechagnome, which is like the Blingtrons, there's battle pets.
Steam-powered auctioneers, those kind of things.
Exactly, the auctioneers. The original mechagnomes were full mechanized robotic constructions.
They were like automatons, kind of like Earthens are.
Yep, just like the Vrykul. The Vrykul were mechanical constructs as well. They...
Really? Like golems, kind of?
Kind of. The Curse of Flesh was created by Yogg Saron as a way to be able to kill the mechanical constructs that were keeping him jailed. How he did that is he infused the Forge of Wills with the Curse of Flesh. So what that did is Loken, who used the Forge of Wills to create his army of Vrykul, is now infected with this Curse of Flesh. The Curse of Flesh slowly turned over the course of thousands of years these mechanical constructs into the fleshy...
With the purpose of weakening them.
Yes.
Right? Making them susceptible to death versus...
Making them vulnerable
these
and
like hardy
able
robots,
to be killed. Because mechanical constructs, once you just break it, you just rebuild another one.
So we come from that. We eventually get infected with the Curse of Flesh, the gnomes. And I know there's a big gap in like history. Like we have all this ancient history, which is recorded by others. And then you almost don't hear about gnomes until, if we're going to go chronologically, the next time anything happens with gnomes is hundreds of years ago when King Mechagon, who was the king of gnomes on Azeroth, right, the Eastern Kingdoms, eventually went out in search of this fabled mechanical Holy Land.
Basically, yeah, which we know as of today as Mechagon Island.
Yeah, so that's where they settled. So that happens, and he's got his own thing, which we might cover another time. But he's off there doing his thing, trying to mechanize everyone, which is the story of mechagnomes.
Like you're saying, that gap, the only history that we really have of gnomes prior to the First War was just mages, like head mages in Dalaran with the Kirin Tor. Other than that...
There was a gnome in the Council of Tirisfal that created the first Guardian. I remember reading that. I don't remember. I'm blanking on the name.
Like out in Blade's Edge, there's gnomes out there. There's no recorded history, but if you go through the quest lines in game, I mentioned in our last episode about Rowley, Tally, and O'Malley with the engineers, the Tinkers. That's out in Toshley Station and Blade's Edge. O'Malley is still out there.
I didn't know where they were.
Studying the druids. If you're into Tinkers and possible gnome druids, I would suggest doing that quest line out in Blade's Edge with O'Malley at Toshley Station because he's out there studying them. He thinks that there's battery packs underneath their rows.
Stay tuned for that Gnome Druid episode because we're going to talk about that sometime.
That's really the only recorded history until we get into Wrath of the Lich King and Gearmaster Mechazod. He was another one that after King Mechagon left, did their thing. This Gearmaster Mechazod, he tried doing the same thing. He was successful in turning unlucky gnomes into these mechanical constructs again, but they were mindless. They weren't the mechanical wonders of Mimiron's creation. They were just mechanized
slaves, basically. So from like the video games standpoint, I don't remember there being any gnomes in Warcraft 1, but in Warcraft 2, they were like support units. There was one that was a flying like scout called a gnomish flying machine, which you see in World of Warcraft. You know, our recorded history and contribution to that second war where the orcs invade from Draenor through the Dark Portal into Azeroth, is that the Gnomish flying machines were. Oh, and they made submarines. That's the other one.
Oh yeah, the subs.
So that was kind of our contribution to the war effort. We had there was like a submarine unit that helped bolster the Alliance naval fleet, and then the flying machines were like a scout unit in that game in Warcraft 2. And then in Warcraft 3, I don't actually remember if there's any gnomes in that one.
I need to.
Might be a flying unit again. I guess I don't know.
That history.
Somehow I've erased Warcraft 3 from my brain. And then we come to World of Warcraft, where initially when you first started playing, the backstory was we were in, I guess we could talk about that now, is we are running out of Gnomeregan, which has been overrun. And refresh my memory, what happens in Gnomeregan? Like, why did we have to abandon ship?
There's another war going on, but at the time we were being overrun by Trogs. And at that point, there's the High Tinker Mechatork and his chief advisor, Sicko Thermoplug.
Like his number 2.
Yeah, his number 2, Sicko Thermoplug. He was very, very much wanting to be... He was basically jealous of Gelbin, is what I'm understanding. He wanted to be the king of gnomes. High Tinker didn't want another king because the last king had left and just wanted to basically go back to the mechanical ways. And I don't know Gelbin's real thinking there.
I would imagine that, he probably saw ambition in Sicko Thermoplug, but no moral fiber, not enough moral fiber to restrain that from becoming dangerous.
Yeah, he was afraid of the implosion that it could create. And obviously he saw it coming because it obviously happened.
It was
and
right.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler, yeah. The Trogs basically burrowed into Gnomeregan through tunnels through the ground. And so they start getting essentially attacked and overrun. But then why don't we live there?
Okay, so Sicko, his idea was to fumigate it. We have a pest problem. Let's fumigate it. So he did. He pushed the button and caused this radioactive implosion, basically, that basically wiped out 80% of Gnomish existence.
Stupid.
The other 20% had to flee.
Oh, whoops.
Sicko stuck around and actually that radiation consumed him and then created the leper gnomes.
Oh yeah, so that when you're playing a new gnome, you start out in an irradiated kind of the top level of Gnomeregan, having to teleport out.
Yes, basically when you start as a gnome, it was after that explosion, and you are part of the relief forces there. They're helping out the safe. Yeah, they're helping, and you're there basically covered in this radiation and
guiding people out.
Exactly. At the end of that quest line to leave Gnomeregan, you go through this this cleansing area.
Oh right, yeah. There's a part where it like cleanses you or something. It's like a car wash almost.
Basically, yeah, to hose you off before you take the elevator out or teleport out. I always end up taking the elevator, and the quest it has you teleport out, so I always have to go down every time I do it. But basically, that's where we're at, or that's where we were at. Now, since Cataclysm, it's moved on to Mechatork formed basically an invasion team to push back into Gnomeregan. So before Cataclysm, Gnome started out in Dunmoral with the dwarves. It was the same starting area because we didn't actually, Gnomeregan was just a dungeon. And that was the story of us going to fight Sicko, who has basically self-proclaimed as king of Gnomeregan and is basically, if you want the city, come get it.
Did it get retconned to the story it is now? Because I know, I'm pretty sure I read a book called the Story of Warcraft or something along those lines, and it was one of the early developers of Warcraft. He was a level designer, but he kept all these notes and wrote a book. And a lot of the early game decisions, or a lot of the decisions that were made in vanilla WoW, were made because literally they didn't have time to implement other starting zones.
Maybe.
I wonder if that's the case with the gnomes.
Originally, gnomes weren't even going to be a playable race.
While you were just talking about it, I Googled to see, because I had a gap in knowledge. Apparently, gnomes were going to be a playable race in Warcraft 3 as well, one of the factions, but then they just don't appear in the game at all. At all. I think there might be like a gnomish workshop as one of the buildings in the game, something along those lines, but there's no gnome units.
I know I heard somewhere, maybe a viewer can find it and put it in a comment somewhere that
that'd be
they were like a last minute decision to be put into the actual game of World of Warcraft, which I believe is why they piggyback on the starting zone of where the dwarves are. And then in Cataclysm, there is Operation Battle for Gnomeregan, I believe, or Operation Gnomeregan, which was a quest line to reclaim or get a foothold inside of Gnomeregan and have that new base of New Tinkertown, because gnomes were originally stationed in Tinkertown in Ironforge, which is like a mechanical oasis section of Ironforge.
Right.
So it wasn't until Cataclysm that New Tinkertown became a thing. The new starting area
was established outside of...
Yeah, it's just outside the main
Gnomeregan.
gates of Gnomeregan before you take the elevator down. And that whole starting scenario, which now has the like the dungeon portals there, and then you start
there's like training camps and some buildings and some stuff, starter quests to do.
Yeah, it's all like medic and like saving the gnomes, fighting your way out, getting cleansed, so that way you can go out into the open world, and then you start your quest in New Tinkertown. You meet up with the king out there.
I think that's a pretty good place to catch us up to almost current content. We'll talk a little bit more maybe in another segment where we talk about how gnomes are now, and then how they've progressed since that starting experience has changed. We'll talk about mecha gnomes and kind of the increased involvement of gnomes in the storyline that Blizzard has brought to us in another episode.
See where it could go.
Yeah, where it's gone since they kind of fixed the introductory portion of the gnome story, which is what we just talked about, where it could go, and then explore where it might go in the future, because we've got some ideas around that stuff. So we want to, maybe we'll table that and cover that in another segment.
For sure.
All right.
Because if you go talk to High Tinker Mechatork in New Tinkertown, he says it's only a matter of time before we reclaim our city. So we can probably talk about that for sure.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, that would be awesome. Next, we're going to move over to the Gnomish News Network, where we talk about WoW news and WoW events. And what we're talking about today is the Tazavesh, the mega dungeon, Tazavesh, the Veiled Market, coming in 9.1.
Exciting stuff. We'll see you there.
You're listening to GNN, the Gnomish News Network, your source for what's going on in Azeroth and other planes of existence.
Today on the Gnomish News Network, we are talking about the mega dungeon coming in 9.1, Tazavesh, the Veiled Market. And I know I'm excited about it. I think you're pretty stoked about it too.
Oh, you don't even know.
I think you've seen a couple previews of it, maybe some stuff on Wowhead, or I think Blizzard has an official.
Yeah, I've been watching some videos.
Totally. Let me just give you a quick rundown. It's a 5-player mega dungeon, kind of in the vein of the Mechagon City dungeon, or Operation Mechagon, I think it's called.
Operation Mechagon, yeah.
Yeah, so it's more bosses than a regular instance. Initially, just like Mechagon, it will be mythic only, and it has 8 bosses. It's essentially the brokers of the different cartels. This is their marketplace. They're traders in another reality dimension, somewhere in the Shadowlands. This marketplace exists, and there's a small quest line to unlock it, so it shouldn't be too much of a pain in the butt for that.
Yeah, it's not like a big attunement quest line or anything like original Karazhan for the raid or whatnot, but there's a little entryway there.
So I went and looked through some of the features of it, and it has got 8 bosses, and pretty much every one of them is awesome looking, really creative, really interesting mechanics, and the artwork is like Ouroboros architecture themed, kind of, but like with a lot of like crates and clutter and like a marketplace that's busy. It almost reminds me of an Indian marketplace, kind of like when I see it in movies. I've never been to India, but you know what I mean? Like it's got a lot of stuff stacked up, or maybe any marketplace. So you're getting there, and the first NPCs you encounter are the customs officers. You have to like fight your way through to get into the first area, which is the security room, basically. And an NPC it's a broker NPC that has these 4 legs, comes out spinning what look like lightsabers to me.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kind of General Grievous a little bit. And it's got a pretty cool mechanic. Do you remember the shield in the Odin fight where you had to, or the NPCs that they put up a shield and you can only hit them from one side?
Yes.
So this NPC has a shield like that, but instead of staying stationary, it rotates around the boss. So you have to be making sure you're not on the side with the shield. So you have to be repositioning the entire time.
Interesting.
It's pretty cool.
It's a cool mechanic.
It's all right. I mean, that's the most interesting thing out of that. It has, you know, it puts spinning sword traps on the ground, and it's pretty cool looking. It does a part where it traps a single player in like a stasis cell.
Yeah.
And then starts marching towards that player. And so I guess the rest of the group has to break that person out. And once you break it out, the boss still continues to march towards that location. So then, but if your person's there, you get killed or whatever.
That's funny.
Then it moves into the market, which is where the next 3 bosses are. And the second boss is basically like an auction house or a bazaar or whatever the word is. And it's 3 mini bosses that make up the encounter.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, there's a big range of boss types that are really kind of cool and varied, and I really like that. This boss here, it's the first one is a devourer, which I guess we saw an anima devourer with the hungering devourer in Castle Nath. And it's got this really great ability that it does like an explosion from itself, and it also does this thing that reminds me of the octopus boss from Nazjatar, where it creates like these basically all these explosions on the ground that you have to like get in the gaps between.
Oh, that one. Okay, that was a safety dance one.
I like that mechanic because it was just...
Are you talking about the Ichor boss?
Yeah, that one.
Where it drops the Ichor from the roof and you can't stand in those circles?
Exactly.
Dance around the room.
It's not quite the exact same, but the visual here is like there's an orb falling and there'll be a big circle on the ground that's going to explode when it lands. So you can't be in those circles, but there's so many that you basically have to dance into the gaps because it's covering most of the floor.
That's interesting.
And so I don't know, that's pretty exciting to me. And so you have to time your movements to be out of the circle when it lands, I guess, the orb. The second part of that boss is an anima construct that comes out and shoots blue orbs out from it that you have to dodge, which reminds me a lot of the Odin fight. Remember, it shoots the orbs out everywhere.
Oh, right. Yeah, those light orbs that he shot out.
And one of the moves from the Devourer boss is you get this hungering debuff. In the second phase of that fight, you can use that debuff because it persists to absorb the orbs, which explode if you touch them otherwise.
Doesn't it give you like a haste buff or something?
I think it does. So it powers you up, which lets you defeat things. Like the cool aspect of this is the mechanics from the first boss continue through the second and third bosses or second and third phases of that fight. And the same thing with the anima construct boss has powers that continue into the third phase that help you defeat that boss. So it has all these persistent effects that you have to keep utilizing, and the mechanics keep piling up on you, which is pretty awesome.
That is actually really sweet.
Yeah, I think that's a really creative way to introduce difficulty as the fight goes on.
I'm noticing here that there's 2 mounts for sure that you can get out of it.
Oh yeah, talk about this.
One of them is an achievement mount. They're both discs, right? One's an achievement mount, but...
Oh yeah, we talked about these a little bit last episode.
Yeah, we don't know what that achievement is. Do you think that it's going to be related to like a hard mode like Mechagon?
I wonder. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Because there is one disc that drops off of one of the rares. Drops off of Sole.
Just out in the world?
Sole?
It's not in this dungeon unless it's an NPC in this dungeon, but I don't think it is.
Cartel Master Gear Glider.
Yeah, that must be out in Corthia, maybe? In the new area of the Maw.
Oh, maybe. Okay, I might be reading that wrong then. Oh, Tazavesh Glider. That's the one.
Yeah, so I wonder if... I mean, because in Mechagon, there was a mount that dropped off King Mechagon, the last boss.
On hard mode only.
Oh, is it only on hard mode?
Yeah, so there's 2 mounts that came out of Mechagon, Operation Mechagon. Okay. There's the Peacekeeper Spider Tank, which is the gold spider tank that dropped off of HK on Mythic.
And then there's the HK looking mount.
Then there's the HK looking mount, which is the hard mode mount that drops off of Mechagon if you complete the raid on hard mode.
Yeah. Okay, that's okay. I had those mixed up.
I'm wondering if this mega dungeon is going to have something similar, because it is the brokers, and like it sounds like each boss is a mini game as you were describing them.
Oh, it's so cool. I'm so excited about it.
That's totally what I was looking at. Is are these puzzles going to be like? Could you? I can't wait to get in there and test it out.
My favorite type of play is learning raid style mechanics with a group. That's why I like raiding so much, and that's why I like dungeons a lot, and then it tapers off for me because I've learned the mechanics, raid mechanics. So the reason I like that is it's just really fun to discuss the mechanics when you wipe, or kind of look at it a little bit before you play. Like with the dungeon journal, it shows you, what it's going to look like, and you kind of figure out, okay, well, what if we deal with it like this, or maybe sometimes you look up a guide, but it's executing that. And most dungeons don't have as complex mechanics as raids do, but these mega dungeons do, and I love it. I loved it in Mechagon.
I love these mega dungeons. They did it with Karazhan, Return to Karazhan, which is basically turning a raid into a mega dungeon. It's funny. Obviously, I want it talk about this in its own segment, but I am going to talk about it now as a little breadcrumb. Seeing old raids turned into mega dungeons, I think would be, and this has been discussed in a chat that I was in, would be a great avenue that Blizzard should explore, considering turning these old raids into a 5-man playable current content thing with current tier like rewards, mounts, would basically make the old world current again in a way.
So with Karazhan, they did a return to Karazhan. That was the draw to that, is that it was the story related to that area, so they brought it back. I wonder how they would do that with, I mean, if we, you know, we've hinted at, we have this idea of what if they made an all gnome based expansion? Like I could see Gnomeregan becoming what you're describing.
Exactly. Making it current like that, like you could, even with this new Shadowlands, aka Wrath of the Lich Queen expansion, they could like you could make like a relive Ice Crown in a 5-man scenario where you turn Ice Crown into a 5-man mega dungeon.
Jeez, that would be a big dungeon.
It's a big dungeon, but you could cut it down to 8 bosses.
Maybe.
Right, type thing. But we can get into, I just wanted to mention it because Tazavesh is another one of those mega dungeons where it is a raid, but for 5 people. And
I love it.
I love that dynamic because you're obviously going to get into it. Some of these mechanics, you need 5 people to pay attention.
You need everybody. Yeah, because in like, especially in normal dungeons, it's sometimes you don't even have to worry about the mechanics, especially as you gear up. Like
you just muscle
even
right
heroic, even in Mythic Zero, you're just like, well, just absorb it. It's easier than dealing with it. The healer can deal with it. My health can deal with it. This one here, like, so some of these mechanics that I'll get to are just, there's one fight that I'm going to get to in here in just a minute that I cannot wait to play it, but I read it described as the friendship ruiner. So the next thing, you basically fight your way through the auction house bosses, which is the 3 bosses where the mechanics persist. Then you go into the mail room, and the next boss is basically the mail room. There's a robot that is called the Postmaster, POST acronym, which I actually don't know what it stands for. And basically the mail room's going haywire and attacking you, as is the boss. But like sometimes there's a bunch of abilities that have awesome names in this thing.
I love that it's called the Mailroom Mayhem.
It's so good.
That's hilarious.
Like some of them aren't bosses as much as they're encounters, which this is just another attribute that it makes it raid-like.
I love it. I love these mini raids, 5-man content, 5 gnome content.
Challenging.
Yeah, it's great. I love this.
This mailroom mayhem, one of the effects is called money order, and it shoots a bunch of coins down at you, and you have to soak it to split the damage, kind of a meteor effect. There's one that I think is really interesting. All around the room are all these giant vacuum tubes.
Oh, right. I remember seeing
and
that.
only one of them's active at once. And so you start getting unstable goods thrown into the room, which are bombs.
Like bombs.
They have that bomb icon, and so you have to pick it up, and it's just like when you move the golden things in the last fight in Old Deer, where like you move slow.
Yes.
So you have to throw them in the one active mail slot, so it gets out of the room before it kills everybody.
Doesn't that act like a hot potato, where you can grab it and toss it to your friends?
You can throw it to friends.
When you throw
to get
it, there's a
the
targeted location on the ground that your friend can see it, and they have to stand in it to catch it, and you can basically hot potato to it if you can't get to it.
I think that is the issue. Yeah, so that sounds really fun, the coordination of that. I mean, it'll be a little frustrating.
Well, because there's other mechanics on top of that are happening at the same time. Like,
yeah,
it's so cool.
But that one's really cool. And the vacuum tube thing, it's cool looking. And I hope the Postmaster becomes a pet, because it's a really cool looking robot.
I might, spoiler alert, they did at BlizzCon Line, when they talked about this and introduced it, one of the pets is this broker style looking mailbox looking battle pet thing.
Ooh, I like that.
So it's pretty cute. There's also this cute...
Did it have a big blue eye?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so that's what this thing looks like. It looks like it has a standard mailbox for a head, except it's got a big blue eye on the front.
I hope it becomes a pet. I hope they become, that would be cool if it was either a toy or a pet, and you can summon this mailbox, broker-looking mailbox thing.
Yeah, that would be pretty rad.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
There's another part of this dungeon where it's a puzzle trading game, but in the idea of the Court of Stars segment, where you have to uncover the hidden demon. where you have to go and ask everybody. And there's all these brokers that you have to trade, like gem brokers to money brokers to armor brokers to whatever. And you have to like trade the right stuff to them to unlock the next section of the dungeon.
Interesting.
And so you have to coordinate with your team to get to unlock to the next area, which gets you into a place called the Oasis Bar.
Fancy.
And what it is this story is, it's actually kind of awesome. The story of this encounter is pretty interesting. The previous band gets booed off the stage.
All right, I remember this.
And your team has to pick up the instruments, which are a drum, guitar, saxophone, trumpet, and microphone, and basically please the crowd.
Yeah, play a little ditty.
Yeah. And so the way it plays out is notes appear on the floor, and you have to collect the notes with your instrument to get like power-ups, basically.
That's going to ruin friendships, man.
Oh, man. Oh, wait. No, you think that one's bad. The next one's going to be amazing. So, and that's a broker named Zogron, which I think we talked about this before, but the brokers, there's all these cartels in Ouroboros. Mm-hmm. And it's like cartel so, cartel ve, cartel ba, all these things. Well, all the brokers start with the 2 letters of their cartel they belong to. So Venari.
All right. You have Omaza, and then you also have So As Me. That's interesting.
So like as an example in Nathria, there is Artificer Zymox, right? And one of the bosses, and he belongs to Cartel Zai. And there's another, Cartel Zai is one of the war cartels, but it's like known as like a warmongering cartel. It's military and fighting, and
yeah, there's another Zyxa is in the other side.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's how you know is the first part of their name is just their cartel, which is something I didn't notice, but somebody else did, and I read it somewhere.
So with Venari, and then you have Vikan and Venat, I believe.
They're all in the same...
They're the vendors from Torghast.
Is that why they named it that? It's Vendor or something? Cartel Ve? That's just how the name came up?
Maybe, because like you have Venari... Like Venari is a vendor. You have Vikan. Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So I don't know. Just something to keep out as you adventure through the Shadowlands. You'll say, oh, that person's in cartel. But like, there's that room you go into in the inn in Ouroboros, and you go downstairs, or maybe just to the right and then downstairs, and there's all these cartel people sitting around. And I'm like, I wish there was more backstory about the intertrading of the cartels, because that just seems like such a rich area that you could create all these interesting stories.
I'm pretty sure that's where the quest starts. I haven't been on the PTR to look at it, but there is that portal. I was down there grabbing my weekly dungeon quest the other day, and I saw that portal, and I jumped through it as if I could go somewhere, but obviously I can't yet. And I want these portals to open. I can't wait for these mysterious places to go, and like going to Tazavesh, it's a place that we don't know. We've never seen before.
I know. I can't wait.
It's going to be super exciting, especially going in there with like guaranteed 4 other gnomes. And it's just, we're going to wreck that place. I cannot wait. It's going to be great.
So the next fight is the one that I read was they call it the friend killer because it takes so much coordination.
Okay.
So it's from Cartel So.
Oh, it's this one. Okay.
So this one, and I don't remember what the encounter name is, but essentially they create, this boss creates portals that look like a little vertical column of light with a shape over them, and there's 3 matching pairs. There's 2 circles, 2 squares, and 2 triangles. And when you touch one color or one shape, you get teleported to the other. So if you touch one triangle, you get teleported to the other triangle, which is a great effect, I guess. And they're all kind of slowly moving around the room. And so you want to, if you want to get to one side of the room, you could touch the triangle one, end up on the other triangle one. And I'm sure there's a small cooldown, but once you touch it again, you go back.
You're probably going to get into this throughout the fight. The room starts to get divided, right?
And gets dangerous. So what happens is the boss will create a wave that originates at one point, and it's like an expanding circle. And the outside, like the diameter of the circle, perimeter of the circle, as it expands out, is a wave of energy that can, I don't know if it kills you or it just does damage, but you need to avoid it. And you can be inside the circle and you can be outside the circle, but you can't let that line of the outside edge of the circle touch you. And eventually it starts at one point and expands outward. So what you need to do is figure out what portal you can go into to go into inside the circle or away from the circle. Ideally, you want to jump inside the circle without crossing the line physically, which doesn't seem too hard on its surface. You see that there's a triangle inside and there's a triangle outside. You touch the triangle and you appear. Well,
that's at the start of the fight.
Yes, the broker divides the room in half with like a wall of energy that not only physically stops you, but breaks line of sight.
So your healers are going to have a great time.
Oh, going to be fantastic. So then you have to make sure you're jumping, you can't just run to whatever portal. You might have to use a portal to get to a portal to escape this wave. or die to it. And then later on in the fight further, they divide it again. So it's into 4 squares instead of 2 halves. So it's 4 quarters instead of 2 halves, and just making it where you might have to jump from circle. And then when you come out the other circle, use that triangle to jump to the safe spot.
Yeah, it sounds like a tanking nightmare. As a pug group, I can see that being a very difficult fight.
Oof.
In a coordinated group, the difficult part is going to be not losing sight of your healers, so that way you can be healed, but also the tank positioning themselves. Like the tank is going to have to be on point for that.
It's going to take some foresight there just to see like, okay, here's how everything in the fight is moving.
Exactly. And like plan ahead, right? And basically find the end of the maze and find which portal is going to get you to the end of that maze. And the maze is as simple as just 4, like by the end of the fight, when most like fights get hectic, it's divided into the quadrants, right? So
I
like,
wonder if the quadrants are in the same spot every time.
I
Like,
don't
could we
know.
put markers down and have 4, like, 4 markers and
Call
say like,
out.
okay, you need to go from orange to blue, blue to red, and then that's how you do it.
hopefully that would be a way. I haven't seen it enough. Like I said, I'm
Right, to
I'm
really
kind
map
of-
it out yet.
Yeah, like I haven't actually gone onto the PTR to do it. I might actually see if I can get a group together to go test that out, transfer our characters over, and maybe go play around in the dungeon a little bit, because the testing is available. Because it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, and if it is going to be a set quadrant, so you can set up the markers and be like, the tank can call out, okay, I'm going to jump from red to blue to green, and then change it as it goes. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that one specifically is going to pan out, because it's so much preemptive thinking.
That's the one I'm the most excited about, because when it goes right, you're going to feel like Warcraft gods. When it doesn't, you're going to be like, oh my god.
Because the portal jumping aspect of it alone, and like outranging your healer, but in this case, LOSing your healer, getting hit by damage, but your healer can't get to you because they need because people are separated. Like,
And that's not going to be on your healer. That's going to be on you to. The healer can't be in range of all 5 people if they're going everywhere.
No,
The
exactly,
people are going
right.
to have to be moving to the healer.
so the healer and the tank are basically going to have to move together, and I think
so. Yeah.
I think there's other things going on that DPS have to be separated.
Yeah, I think there's small explosions that peer out, so you can't just be standing out. You can't stack the whole fight. So then after you defeat that boss, these brokers are all about portals. They're very much like ethereals, right? They're energy beings that have portals, and they kind of live in a void dimension type feel to them.
Yep.
The next part is you start jumping through portals to different parts of Azeroth and other places, but the next place you go is you end up in Stormheim, and you fight through a bunch of Murlocs. Yeah, like a bunch of Murloc
So
trash.
many Murlocs.
And you go to the Vault of Agrimar in Stormheim, and you're fighting a giant, it's like what was in the warrior class hall, the big like robot armor guys that were like automations for Odin.
Oh, I don't even know.
Well, but you can picture what I'm talking about. I don't remember what they're called, but they basically look like giant Viking type statues that come to life. Like you fight one in the first boss of Odin land, whatever that first dungeon.
Oh, that's Halls of
Valor. Yeah, so it looks like that. And the way it works is he has a big AoE ability, and there's 5 consoles around the room, or there's 4 consoles around the room, and 4 players get marked with those glyphs from Halls of Valor over your head. Mm-hmm. Remember, you had to go to your corresponding symbol in Halls of Valor during the Odin fight. So it's kind of like that, and you get that glowing red, green, blue, purple, whatever mark symbol over your head, and there's 4 consoles. The only problem is the consoles themselves are not lit up, but there's a 5th console that a 5th player will activate that has almost like a map on it. So the 5th console represents the room, and the things show up in the right corners, so you have to reference that to go to your right shapes to deactivate the boss. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. It's just that's the main thing. You have to take the glyphs to the right place based on console number 5's direction.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, you're talking about Hilbrand.
Yeah, Hilbrand.
Yeah, Sword of the Keepers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a big Vrykul, basically.
Maybe that's
construct, dude.
Construct. I couldn't figure out the word. Yeah. So then the next boss is the one I think everybody had been talking about, which is the Infinite Pirate Dragon.
Oh man, the guys at Blizzard I want an Infinite Drake, Pirate Dragon.
Mm-hmm. What else can we add to it?
Let's put Let's just make it a pirate. That's
Okay, all right.
cool.
All right.
Yeah, we have a pirate dragon.
I'll sign the paperwork, get started. So the fight is interesting. I think it's a little more simple than some of the other fights, and I wonder if the damage is what's going to be the hard part, but it has a bunch of trash that spawns that has a lot of health and a lot of, you know, you're not intended to DPS it down, I don't think, but the dragon has a breath that will one-shot the ads. So you need to keep the ads grouped up, and then when the dragon's about to cast, you need to get out of the way so the stuff gets killed.
Time Captain Hooktail.
Yeah. And the whole time you're fighting, there's a ship because you're fighting right at the coastline of Borealis. That's where you've teleported to in this segment. And, you know, these last couple bosses, even the next one I'm going to talk about, there's no trash. It's just boss to boss to boss to boss. So it'll be a pretty quick part of that dungeon. And it's all just working out the mechanics with your friends, it's awesome. And so the ship that's just off the shore is shooting off spears and trying to pull you into the water, which will kill you. On top of that, the ship is bombarding the shoreline. So you have to watch out with that while managing the ads, while DPSing the boss and avoiding the boss's breath.
Gross.
It's not as complex as, I think it's more straightforward than the portal boss before.
Did you see anything about his tail? Because he is a dragon.
Oh, I wonder if he does have a tail. Most dragons do. I would assume he does.
Well, his name's Hooktail. You think there's a mechanic around that?
Is there? I don't know. That part I didn't see.
I really hope there is, because like it's in his name.
It is. I wonder why. So it actually is a pirate queen, I think is the premise. And she then reveals her true form to be an infinite dragon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. That brings us, if we can manage to defeat that boss, it brings us to the final boss of the fight, which is a broker that you break through, creates a collapsing star, which is one of its first abilities. It's pretty interesting. And it has to basically go off 4 times, and you have to soak it 4 times or it will be a big explosion. So you do that and it'll use up all its energy and go away.
This one's definitely going to take some character awareness and some communication.
And so this part I really like this next mechanic. In phase 2, the boss turns into an energy being and creates these 5 relics around it, which kind of look like spiked orbs a little bit.
This is what I'm excited about.
All the players get linked with a line between not each player, but there's a line from you to the next player, and basically you can create a circle. So everybody's connected to another person twice, right? You have a line coming from you and a line going to you. And just like the Enerva fight in Castle Nathria, and with the triangles, you have to put those lines through the relics to break them.
So in a coordinated fight, you could do 5 for 5.
Yes.
However,
so the way I think it works is it like the connected players, it goes off every once in a while and blows up anything in its or any of the relics in its path.
I believe from the video that I saw, it's basically like a channeled ability. So all 5 of you will get targeted. We'll have that arrow, and in that time frame, we have to position ourselves to intercept as many orbs as possible with those arrows.
There's 5 lines. You could conceivably break all 6 relics, but if you don't, then the other relics will persist. Mm-hmm. The boss, and then they'll get rid of them. The boss fires out a projectile that is like a glowing gold energy that bounces from projectile to projectile, making them shoot golden spikes out of them in all directions they have to dodge. And if there's 5 orbs up, so it'll go 1 and 5 orbs will come from, or a bunch of spikes will come from that or relic, and then the next one, and then the next one, all 5 times. So if you haven't broken any of them, it's a lot of stuff to dodge while trying to DPS and heal and tank and all that other stuff.
I think one of the main focuses I'm going to go in there as DPS is having the DPS at least try to take out 3 at a time, keeping it down to 2, which would definitely make it a lot easier to deal with. But like ideally you want to do all 5, but that just takes coordination and some preemptive thinking of knowing when to call that out and positioning yourself, because you don't know, from what I've noticed is like you don't actually know the order that it's being connected to, right? So it's not like a set order that those beams are going to go through. I think it's completely random.
Yeah. So you just want your beam going through a relic. I think that's the key, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like you have to break the relics in a certain order. I don't think.
No, it's just making the best use of that mechanic and destroying as much as possible.
Right.
Where it obviously is possible.
Saves your group as much hassle as, exactly.
Yeah. If you can focus down and hit 3 out of the 5, I think that would be a good start, a good focus. Clear out half of the room at least.
And and then on top of that, the relics shift around the room, kind of like the orbs in King Mechagon fight. Remember how every once in a while they periodically will like show an arrow and move to a new location?
Oh yeah, the stunning bot things.
Yep. So those things, that's same idea with that as they move like that. And that's all, it's a huge dungeon, 8 bosses.
What's cool about that is there is a portal network in there.
Right, that you can unlock early like you encounter in one of the first couple rooms, there's a portal room that they don't go anywhere at that point.
Yeah. But on your way to the other bosses, much like Nathria with the mirrors, these portals are going to work the same way. So on your way to another boss, there's a little side mission that you can do. I don't know like all the details in it. I probably should have looked into that a little bit further, but we'll be able to there's vendors, like there's an antique vendor, a fruit vendor, a meat vendor, and a toy vendor. I'm pretty sure cool. Like a lot of these have to do with unlocking the portals, so that way it allows for fast travel, because like you mentioned,
your corpse run could be right back to the last boss. I think there's a portal, I read somewhere, there's a portal right before the last boss.
Yeah, I think there's 4. But I could be wrong, because a lot of it is jumping all across Azeroth too, right? So that corpse run, it's going to be a long run without those portals.
It's fine, like at some point in the Operation Mechagon, the dungeon, when you die, it's not like you start at the beginning once you get past HK. At that point, you start midway anyways.
Yeah, there's an NPC in there that's right before the Robodrone.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's not anything like that. I don't believe you start midway through this dungeon. You start at the beginning, but if you've unlocked the portal network, then you can you can get to the later bosses or try them again or whatever.
Yeah, they do reset you at the beginning, but the first boss is the customs officer, which is the portal room, I believe. And like a lot of the mechanics, I was reading here, the mechanics for the portal room guy, he's yelling out liquids are not permitted in packages.
Yeah, the writing is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. These little hidden voice acting is that's clever. It's funny.
Yeah, they're Blizzard are the kings of that kind of stuff. That's great. So I think that kind of concludes our episode for today. How do you think we did?
Good. I like talking about these mega dungeons, and totally. I actually look forward to breaking down more mega dungeons in the future.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm on board with that.
Bringing back these old raids as 5-man mega dungeons.
Yeah, I think it's a great path forward, and I think they're going to continue it. I think an expansion is pretty good. I think that it might, because eventually this thing is going to be, it's starting out Mythic only, but eventually it will be split into 2 Heroic and Mythic Plus style dungeons, right? No, just like they did with Mechagon. They did it with Karazhan too, with the Keystones. Exactly. That's it for this episode of Eureka. I think we nailed it, personally. So if you guys want to find, more info about it or other episodes, you can find us at gnomereganforever.com/podcast. And you can find each of us on Twitter. The show notes will be attached to the podcast. So we'll try to link some relevant stuff that we talked about, anything we referenced, we'll try. But hit us up with your thoughts or ideas for segments or whatever, and we will, you'll hear from us soon. Awesome. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Our gnome quarter is running low on electroflux. We need to hurry, so you can find more expertly engineered episodes at gnomereganforever.com/podcast. Thanks for listening. For Gnomeregan!